Thank gossip, and milk. Imagine an email not sent. Imagine the many emails not sent, expressing complaints of physical discomfort. Employees say it is something in the building. The building is new, and after the scientists moved in, the headaches, nausea, memory loss, and vision problems started. The something remains just vague enough to ignore. The building is new and shiny and expensive. The employees addressing something are all women. Maybe it is a female thing. Something female is happening. Testing, depending on who you would ask, a potential cause was found and, most importantly in this scientific context, proven. An expert measured the Hertz level, and low-frequency noise was detected. The effects of low-frequency noise are debated, but supposedly 10% of the total population is affected, physically affected, by this absent, present sound wave. Communication was hushed. Emails were not sent. There was an explicit effort to frame the complaint as a problem experienced by the female staff, especially older female staff. The women who had complained were all over 40, so one safety officer had reassured younger female staff, that they wouldn't be having any problems. It was probably a menopause thing. The people I met who had experienced bodily discomfort were not experiencing menopause. Few were over 50. One young scientist who had recently started working at the Institute told me that she felt it too. She was not going to raise a complaint because then she would be placed in the weak and feeble category. No way, she expressed. Gossip circulated. Someone has suggested that the low frequency noise or the something in the building was causing miscarriages. Technician Iris started to keep a daily logbook to track her headaches and discomforts. She included the daily weather, because wind seemed to increase the sensation of pressure in the building. Iris started an Excel sheet and sent it around, asking colleagues to fill in their symptoms. Those who did wanted to remain anonymous. The more I encountered this secretive speech, never used for topics other than health complaints, the more interested I became in it. I was intrigued by the rapid and emotional circulation of this information because it was also portrayed as the problem of only the few and the feeble. Iris felt comforted by the minority statistics of 10%, right, of the total population being affected by low frequency noise, because for her it explained why it was so difficult to raise awareness and incite improvements at the Institute. To say something exists for only 10% of the population is to state something is rare. Because if 40% of people in the building experienced the low frequency noise, wouldn't you wish to hear it too? In the 90s, researchers found neurological proof that 10% of the general population is born gay. It refers to the same biocentrism that Sylvia Wynter criticizes in her text on Being Human as Praxis. Normality can be acquired by normalizing one's behavior as natural. Because biology makes you gay, it is okay. Unfortunately, using a biological marker as a tool for liberation is meant to keep the 90% intact, safekeeping the majority from a clearly classifiable minority. The proven minority of 10% tells us not to expect more. Instead of seeing queer as an ever-growing disruption of the norm and potentially contagious, you accept queer as a contained rarity. If I don't hear low frequencies, I just don't belong to the 10%. The biocentric story makes distinctions static. Within this narrative, the only way to create change is by topping, dominating nature. In Objectivity, a book that deals with the history of objectivity, authors Lorraine Daston and Peter Gallison describe a switch from artistic representation of perfected species to the ideology of realism that demanded the depiction of an average. So instead of finding the most blossoming, extravagant, flamboyant, and characteristic nettle for an atlas on plants, you'd collect many nettles and extract what an average nettle looks like. Average, not perfection, became a measure for truth. Scientific research needs to be falsified and repeated in order to produce truth. And this means that an average is much more likely than a deviance to become truth. An average outcome is considered law-likely, to speak again with Wynter, while an exception obstructs certainty. Thinking from absence and ghosts, these deviances are of interest. In the refusal of a reiterated and reproduced sameness, ghosts can appear. I joined a lab meeting in which Sophie presented her last weeks of research. She said, unexpected low trappings happened, but only 2 out of 30 times. Implying with the statement that the value of the unexpected should not be overestimated. From a scientific perspective, 2 out of 30 is nothing. Most likely, it is a mistake in the setup of an experiment or measurement. However, from a ghostly perspective, a glimpse is enough. Often the only thing you get to imagine presence. The presence of gossip in the building caught my interest even more when one of the Institute's directors expressed his disappointment with my artist in residency. He had hoped I'd be occupied with more interesting things than headaches. He had hoped that my presence would have provoked him more. His agitation with my lack, my not, flared when he expressed that he had invested time and money in my presence. What definition would grasp a person's provoked reaction to not being provoked enough? What negative is that? He said he expected me to build bridges between my own interest and the Institute, but my response to their daily practice as scientists with black feminism made no sense to him. Admittedly, I too wondered whether it makes sense. The walls of the Institute made me doubt everything. But how else to disrupt the sensical How else to rewrite knowledge as I know it, if not by allowing the unknown or the uncertain? I printed all the notes that I documented and took during my first month at the Institute, the Bio-Nanoscience Institute. Each person who appeared in the notes received the pages on which they were mentioned. If there was something in the notes that they didn't want public, they could retract. So, for example, many retracted their notes on their headaches in the building. Then I displayed the notes with the blackened markings, the retracted markings in black, in the Bio-Nanoscience building's lactation room. The lactation room was 1 square meter in size, a closet space on the ground floor. On the door, an occupied or free switch ensured the user's privacy. Inside, next to a comfy chair, sat a small fridge for milk. On the wall hung a whiteboard with names and email addresses of those who used the space for lactation, inviting the users to exchange information. The lactation room felt like a secretive place, though formally provided. In the Netherlands, an employer must offer a private and hygienic, clean space for lactation. In the first 9 months after labor, an employee can use maximally 1/4 of her work hours on lactation. And I'm saying her here because they only refer to cis women in this institute space. I felt drawn towards this legally enforced closet space. I hope to question and highlight how information flows at the Institute. Why are aspects of body, urgency, and fluidity rarely discussed during work? What's the flow of gossip? As Silvia Federici points out in her book Witches, Witch Hunting, and Women, gossip used to be just another word for important oral communication. In agricultural times, women would gather and share gossip to inform each other without the corrective gaze of husbands and landowners. Gossip wasn't shared beyond their circle, and it couldn't be documented. With the increasing control of the landowners and the introduction of industrialization, gossip became negatively marked. It became known as backstabbing and idle women's talk. Federici shows how the revolutionary quality of gossip and the women's access to embodied knowledge and illegible communication was suppressed by marking gossip as irrelevant, quotidian, insignificant, capricious. Like milk, gossip should not spill. After one day, the exhibition was taken down. The women who used the lactation room on a daily basis had complained to the building's safety department. Before planning the exhibition, I had tried to reach out to the women who used the space, but it was recommended that I communicate through the safety officer. When they gave their okay, I had assumed that the users of the space had given their consent. That was a mistake. I would usually just have contacted the email addresses on the whiteboard in the lactation room to discuss and see whether the idea of a short exhibition would be welcomed at all. Instead, I followed the Institute's administrative infrastructure. I was trying to do the right thing according to the rules. I was trying to follow the rules, and this, I learned, meant neglecting the users. Only after the exhibition was taken down, I realized that the administrative powers remark that no one really uses that room should have been taken as a sign of disconnection, not of fact. What was painful about the rushed disassembling of the exhibition was the rhetoric that accompanied it. One person wrote me that she didn't want to be outed as a user of the room. And I quote from her email to me. Yesterday I was, fill in the name. Yesterday I was the scientist at work. Now I am a whining mom. Reduced again to a body, chaos, excess, spilling. In Becoming Human, Zakiya Jackson writes, "In order to become human, without qualification, you must already be man in its idealized form." End quote. The scientist who is also a mother can lose the qualification scientist. The scientist who is a father will not be less scientist when revealing signs of parenthood. If the male scientist misbehaves, he might lose his job, but he won't be less scientist-like. While the mother fears a lack of access due to gender, whiteness makes her expect that rules are in place for her benefit. Hence, it is no surprise that the safety officer was called to take the exhibition down. Whiteness creates the belief that rules and order are there for protection. Instead of radically contending with the structures in place, you believe that one day, soon enough, you acquire a computed safe position at the plus side of all binary positions. If only the ghosts didn't exist.
Du corps. Du corps. Par le corps. Avec le corps. Depuis le corps et jusqu'au corps. That's what Artaud says. It means from the body, by the body, with the body, through the body, to the body. Artaud is my favorite theorist. Maybe because the kind of theater that Artaud dreamed about is a kind of theater free of psychology, which is a little bit impossible these days. You know what's impossible about doing theater? Everything. Every single thing. I mean, apart from the impossibility of making a living, there are impossible aspects of theater which I find amazing. I think theater is far more high-tech than cinema. It's impossible for someone to literally transform into another person right in front of your eyes, or for you to be transported to another space within minutes without any editing, without any special effects. So what's more high-tech than theater? In very ancient times, theater people were the ones who would tell stories. They would channel ancestors. We would get into a trance and communicate with spirits. We would heal the sick and move herds of antelope. We would bring rain and calm social unrest. And it worked. I mean, it must have worked for thousands of years. Otherwise, these traditions would not have survived, right? I mean, after the first couple of failed rain dances, the medicine man or woman would have been fired, don't you think? I have seen photos of rain dances up until the 1950s. We made impossible things possible. I always wanted to be an actor. And here I am doing it now. Antonio Machado says, in order to write poetry, you must first invent a poet who will write it. And Carl Sagan said, if you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe. That's kind of what I feel I did. In order to become an actor, I had to first write plays in which people like me existed. So I became a playwright and created those worlds. I was 6 years old, and I knew I wanted to become an actor. I don't know how I got the idea to be an actor. That's another impossible thing, because when I was 6 years old, we were literally living in the middle of the desert in Saudi Arabia. There was nothing. We had no movie theaters, no actual theaters, no plays. I had never seen or heard a play, but deep down, somehow I knew when the teacher asked us in first grade to write down what we wanted to be when we grew up, I wrote I wanted to be an actor. And then the principal came into the classroom to do a surprise inspection. And I remember very well how she leaned over my desk and she erased the word actor and wrote actress, which was maybe my first introduction to transphobia. My impossible desire to be a boy and my impossible desire to do theater were joined there in a single word on the paper in front of me, and she erased it. I think at that moment I began to understand transphobia. I understood that it was going to be impossible for me to play boys' parts. I would have to play girls' parts. Me, someone who was always sitting on the boys' side of the lunchroom, wishing my dad would buy me a skateboard so I could skate with them. And for me, being a trans child was forever intertwined with theater. Stories were there to save me. I had a lover when I was 10. We were best friends. I was the boy and she was the girl. We would lay in each other's arms at her house. I would make up stories for us that we were on a spaceship. And even though we were only 10 years old, I cannot tell you about the things that transpired between us out there in outer space. My second documentary theater performance happened in my dad's village when I was around 8. There used to be a postman there who wore an Arab headdress and delivered the mail on his donkey. The donkey had 2 mail bags slung on either side of it. One day, the mailman brought a letter to the old woman who lived near my grandmother and aunt's house. The letter was from her son in America. The old woman couldn't read, so she brought it over to our house. She asked my father to read it because my grandmother couldn't read and neither could my aunt. And as she walked through our door with that letter in her hand, everything just kind of went in slow motion for me. She was so moving. She had walked all the way to my grandmother's house with her cane, clutching this letter, clutching to this lifeline. And deep inside my childhood body, I knew her son wasn't coming back. In all my years, I had never seen him, and I knew I would never see him. I knew she was going to die alone in that little stone house up on the hill. And I knew I was watching a tragedy unfold, literally unfold, as she handed my father those pieces of paper. As she handed them to my father, I printed her onto my body, and the next day I slouched into her posture and took her voice into mine and took her sorrow and hope into my heart. And I unfolded an invisible letter and handed it to my father and asked him in her voice, "Son, can you read me this letter?" And my father burst into laughter because it was pretty accurate. Soon he was asking me to do the imitation when relatives came over, and I was both flattered and horrified. When I refused because he wanted me to mock her, he offered me 10 piastres, which was a lot of money for a kid. But then I did it. And I tried to maintain some semblance of artistic integrity all the while. But I feel guilty to this day every time I pick up a 10 piastre piece. Anyway, that was my first and last paid theater gig for the next 30 years.
Because of George H.W. Bush, I thought smart bombs were a good thing. Like the American dream and McDonald's Happy Meals and democracy and a big house and the mortgage that comes with it and grocery stores with enough rice to feed a village and meat, not just on debt, like Mom had during the war, but every day, and G.I. Joes from the cartoons of which the white boy next door had boxes full and took for granted. But Dad thought were too expensive, so I got sack loads of green and tan army men that came with flags, one for each side, like Old Glory for the good guys and Vietnam's for the bad, yet this was peace, and we had all the things my parents never did during the war. So Dad voted Republican because it was Nixon who'd ended it after all, though Saigon fell under Ford, and I barely remember Operation Desert Shield. But don't you think it's a bad kind of mixed metaphor when a shield becomes a storm? I remember NBC or ABC covering it and General Schwarzkopf saying, "I'm now going to show you a picture of the luckiest man in Iraq." And Mom cringed, didn't want to look, and turned away just like she did during Bosnia, but Dad bought me the Gulf War 4-pack VHS set, and I was only 4, but when I turned 5, it's all I ever watched because Barney never did bring on a Vietnamese kid like me, so I was obsessed with machines like the M1 Abrams main battle tank and the F4 Phantom II and its wild weasel configuration, and the B-52 Stratofortress, both of which Mom recognized from her war, which is why it was so hard to watch. But Dad said they had smart bombs, so it wouldn't be like it was in Vietnam. When you believe that there's such a thing as a smart bomb, you can believe in such a thing as a good soldier, though your mother never believed those two words should ever be conjoined, because what is good about a soldier drafting a 17-year-old to go and fight in Cambodia when the war should have been over years ago? She left with her whole family and they came here where the grocery stores dazzled her and there was so much promise. But they still cleaned fast food restaurants after hours because all they were in the end were another source of cheap labor. And her brother died anyway, but in a lover's spat. And she worked, and by some sick cosmic joke, she married a man from the other side and got a job in the defense industry and gave birth to 3 children, 2 of whom joined the army just so she could do all that to qualify for a mortgage on a house she'd end up selling anyway, just so she'd have a little bit of all that food that would get thrown out if she didn't purchase before the sell-by date, just so she could worry about another pair of kids about to go off to war. The day George H.W. Bush dies, they fly the flag at half-mast as if the drug war never happened. My Twitter friends, they're well-meaning people, say, now that was a president. Look at his poise, his civility, his fucking socks. But they never fired an M395 precision-guided mortar munition at a target only to miss by a full kilometer. And how surgical is a smart bomb if the kill radius is 70 meters? And how many schools and roads and hospitals can you build for one Tomahawk cruise missile? I tell my friends I want to write a poem titled, "Because of George H.W. Bush, I thought smart bombs were a good thing," with the lines, "In hell, I hope the GBU paveway 2 is precise enough to pass through your asshole for an eternity with surgical precision." But the kill radius of a stanza like that would be smaller than the real thing. So I say, let's remember the dead presidents and the future dead presidents for all the things we thought were good, like money for college and a guarantee not to be vaporized on your way to school, and the white picket fence Dad lost in the bankruptcy, and those things that made Mom forget that no matter how hard she tried to save my uncle, she still had to clean out his bedroom when he died. She feels it today, like shrapnel from a bomb dropped decades ago, still lodged in her side and mine. and the rain-drenched cells lack all color. I find them in the fields I march, trying to forget relief at crimson streets, marking another people other. These farmers, like great-grandfathers, pickling rice, starved on too much flesh, unburied, for even the wolves roaming overcrowded jungles of men, their fists and gloves and shoves. I remember, before I was born, clouds dropping liquid perdition, Dow chemical shear and puncture and shock. I've been told not to forgive my father, the running dogs lapping milk, BTK boys who know the only tools a white man in a nice suit understands, his friendly smile, friendly fire on my streets, just like dad's hand on my hips. Life sentences for patricide and too many hooches set alight as if we were Zippo-toting GIs. I find my kin in crimes reproduced, but who else will buy our bodies handless fruit the auntie cells on grand pollution of the American birds, since the first track marks ran up the western arm, barbed wire cages in Manzanar into gold like this, study too hard, work too long, fight fights not theirs, for some other man's wealth. I see them salon on who can't feel her fingertips. Granny, wheelie cart, and blinded black eye. I see dozens of angry boys after the men have been taken, multiplied like the Pham. And what did they say about fighting over there? They brought us here to cook and sew and build and fuck and forgot why we fought so, that I fought too hard since before I was born. My weapons, his weapons, heavier than duty, though light. Death is no feather, and a rifle can't light the way home is so far. These stalks of rice, this bitter soil made infertile. So if they come for us, they'll find a jungle, transplanted homes and harvests, a village that won't burn. Skin and cunts and hearts and minds, they can't penetrate the homes we build from homes long taken, and families we choose disobey borders and state. We remember and make things Mama tells me, and memories collected, and the special way dawn breaks, and great-grandmother's perfumed altar we pray and make, nothing they can take from us. Unborn, a statistic. In 2016, 30.1 out of every 100,000 veterans killed themselves. Queer veterans are twice as likely to consider, attempt, and commit suicide. A cliche. Away from home and camp in summer, flower child, discover a genderless nude desire, there a shirtless blonde, freshwater lake, virginal shore, the boy's ribs and spine against muscles and skin tugged taut, cartography in which to lose oneself. Pink suns for nipples, yearning you to make tongued circles, never mind the burns. Other parts outlined by freshwater bathing, other parts a mouth can take whole. He rises out of the water, but staring at the sun will make you blind, and the world holds the word faggot to your throat. And you two boys share a canopy of branches, oak laurel, twin beds of pine needles pushed together. The moon fucks open birch bough gaps and paints a forest on the boy's skin. Look at this foliage speckled face. Tell yourself he looks like a girl back home. That's what it must be, even if you never loved her. Turn away now, child. Forget his name. Another cliche. Teen boy, teen joys riding up 95, best friend in the front seat playing odes to ache. He turns the music down, begs you your thoughts. You don't know if this is love. The hands held defiant to be truck lynched kind of way. The unzipping best friend's pants kind of way. The lips wrapped around cocks kind of way, and forget the taste, you'll get over it. But worst of all, the imagine a future and you chew happily ever after kind of way. Tell yourself you're no fag. Let that lie take you down this road. Another 15 years until you're honest, and he's gone. Muscle memory. Parents fight. Hush now, child. Father wants the home, long gone, Vietnam. Alternate reality where he never lost his daddy, nor the colonnaded home, nor the yellow flag, pinioned to soil, never sown, with steel like glass shattered underfoot. Rule 1 of group gook homes. Take off your fucking shoes. Father never was a gardener, but he plants seeds, grow unchecked in abandoned homes. My worst fear. Mama in the mirror. You, like you, except the younger, prettier version whose name you can't know. They take the money. Paper doesn't mix with blood like water and oil, but shitty gardeners never water, never weed or feed. His crop makes it through customs, these malnourished stalks, plaited into a noose wrapped around Ma's throat. Ma, northern word for southern ma. Viet word for mother, mom, mama, ma. North, south, mother, father, each paired makes my living room a free fire zone. Mama, we are small women and they are big men. I learned to fight from helicopters downed at Apak in Bianja. Marines starved at Khesan. The palace gates in Saigon breached us fighting skirmishes, small arms, plates hurled, broken, a dustpan over dad's head, dragged upstairs by mom's hair. First thing first, paragraph of an army operations order. There's a reason the threat comes before all else. There's a reason to lace keys into your fist, make a flak vest of your teen body. There's a reason no one counts dead civilians. I learned who the enemy is every time. A tragedy. Best friend signs a dotted line, marks a border between you and him and an army at war. Mother won't sign the papers. You are 17 and hate your country. You are 17 and want to die for it anyway, and hold a knife to your stomach. Say you'll open the only door that lets you back inside. Mother remembers, refuses still. 15 years on, you tell her who you are. Not that child at her breasts, not that teen boy, nor the camouflage that is every man's skin, but a woman, grown and blooded, and Mama can refuse you no more. Thank you.
Flood. Her hair spilled over her shoulders, and she was always in a hat and canvas shoes, which may have been why she reminded me a bit of Renato Borghetti, the guy, the sing-folker with the accordion. Whenever I think of that time and of that place, and I try to remember people's faces or their voices, she's the one I picture most clearly. It was 1988, but thinking of it now, it seems like it could have been much earlier. Opposite my house stood Mr. Kuntz's house,
Natalia.
Mr. Kuntz's shop, with his dirt floor and exposed brick walls. That's where I spent most afternoons with Seloy, Mr. Kuntz's daughter. Seloy's mom had died in childbirth, which made them, Seloy and her father, a very serious pair. I liked going there because it was right in front of my house, and because Seloy had the latest Xuxa album. And we danced it to the floor in front of her dad's store until 6:30 at night, since we knew the transformer on the street always blew at 7. 7 p.m. without fail. The transformer probably couldn't handle all the people watching telenovelas, taking showers, switching their radios on, using their blenders, and God knows what else. All at the same time, so it started crackling and sparkling until boom. For a few hours, no one had electricity, and it was like we lived in a far-flung Amazonian village. There were no sidewalks, and the cobblestones in the streets were totally uneven, which cost us kids plenty of toenails, since that's where we learned to play soccer or to ride bikes or to dance to the latest hits. Not bad for a modest neighborhood on the border of Campo Bom and Novo Hamburgo. Our house sat between two garages. The Klein family, dad, mom, and their little daughter, all blonde with alarmingly blue eyes, whose names I can't really remember. And the other side, the one run by the most striking figure of my childhood, a woman whose face I saw only a couple of times, but I never forgot. Both garages had a decent enough clientele, but there was a sort of tension between the two shops that slipped through the walls of my house from both sides. My parents were friends with the Klein family, so we often had lunch together on weekends. My brother and I would play with their daughter, who was my brother's age, I think. It's all a bit of a blur. What struck me most from those gatherings is a phrase I once heard said: how could a machorra like that do such thing? Curious kid that I was, I immediately asked, what's a machorra? Total silence. I followed by my mom laughing really weirdly, clearly embarrassed. The Klein mom was so horrified that that word come out of my mouth that she started laughing too. Mom tried to salvage the situation. Cachorra. Like a dog, she said. Cachorra. But I was sure I heard machorra. So I insisted. But it just changed subject and ignored me, except that they weren't expecting that I was there, listened to every word that they said, to prick up my ears until they found a way back to the subject. So I stayed quiet, feigning interest in it all. My attention focused entirely to them. That's when I understood that they were talking about our neighbor. She was a machorra. The next day, I was leaning over the wall trying to catch a glimpse of her when I heard the crunching sound of her canvas shoes getting closer and stretched myself further over the wall, and I fell. She ran over to help me, and I remember hearing her voice just like a fairy's, asking if I was all right, if I was hurt. Mom ran out of the house, lifted me by the wrists, and dragged me back to our patio. I heard a thank you from my mom and you're welcome from our neighbor, followed by a sound of one sucking kuya. I turned to Mom and asked her why our neighbor was a mashoha. The slurping stopped abruptly. My mom's face turned bright red as she dragged me into the house and asked me where I'd heard that word. Yesterday, at lunch, I said. The canvas shoes crackled over the hard earth as she rushed towards the garage. Mom leaned against the sink, both hands over her face, and sighed in a way that sounded terribly worried. I just stood there wiping the dirt off my elbows and making sure the rest of me was fine too. I'd fallen off a wall, after all, and my mom strangely seemed totally unconcerned. Honey, you can't say those things of people, to people. What kind of things and what kind of people she was talking about? I asked. I honestly couldn't remember, and she answered, with a pinch on my shoulder. My shoulder wasn't hurt, but my feelings sure were. So I went to my room and cried. Between sobs, I tried to figure what a mashoha was, or could possibly be, and why it had offended our neighbor and upset my mom so much. I made up my mind to ask one more time. I'm sorry. She said it was a disease. The neighbor is sick, she said. And I went back to my room nearly satisfied with the response. If it was a sickness, why hadn't she told me? I kept wondering whether it was contagious, but I decided it couldn't be. The garage was always busy after all. I went back to the kitchen. Mom, what kind of sickness? My mom raised her hand to her face again and took a deep breath. It's from rusty metal that they kept in the junkyard. I didn't know you could get sick from metal, but I felt satisfied with the response next day when our teacher explained about tetanus. The following morning, I did what anyone would do for a neighbor who's sick. Or at least what I thought, in my kid brain, anyone would do. I took her flowers. I'd seen on TV. I picked some flowers that grew around my house, real wild flowers, a couple of yellow ones and a bunch of daisies. Then I walked over the mechanic really early so no one would see me and left the flowers at the door in a glass of water. I also left a note wishing her well and asking her to please put the flowers in a vase and return the glass because my mom would probably notice if it was missing. At noon, on my way home, I saw that the flowers were gone and smiled happily. She was taking them. I walked into the house feeling cheerful with a spring in my step, but as soon as I saw my mom's face and the glass that she held the flowers in her hand and heard her voice asking what had gotten into me, my mood was shattered. I explained to her that if the neighbor really had a case of mashoha, whenever it was, someone had to go over there and wish her a speedy recovery. Which what I did. My mom gave me a big hug and said that I was such a good girl, which was why I shouldn't play near the garage anymore. I asked which garage, and she said the neighbor's. Then I asked her if I could play at Mr. Klein's garage, and she said yes. I didn't want to play in any garages, so I went to play with Saarloos. Saarloos put a record on, and we danced between the bags of beans and stack of red floor wax. I remember then that my mom always bought that wax, but our floor wasn't red, and I didn't quite understood. But when I was going to ask Saarloos about the wax, the neighbor walked in. I stopped dancing and stood there petrified. My first thought was that when a person is sick, they should stay in bed. So I asked her, "Are you feeling better, ma'am?" She turned to me, her hair wet over her face, And with pink lips and kind honey-colored eyes, she said she'd never been better. She thanked me for the flowers and need to give me a kiss. Just then, my mom showed up and dragged me out of there by the hair. As we left, I heard Saarloos' dad saying, "Don't worry about it, Flor." Flor. Her name was Flor. And she really looked like a flower too. Actually, her whole name was Flor Linda, a lovely flower. I asked Saarloos about it the next day and told her about the sickness. Saarloos rolled her eyes the way people do when they are accusing someone of being naive, said nothing, took me by the hand into her room and grabbed two teddy bears and two Barbies. Okay, so they weren't Barbies, they were knockoffs, but they were affordable and they worked just fine for what was trying to explain. I was 8 years old and Saarloos was 11. She took one of the dolls and the teddy bear and began the explanation. So this is the man and this is the woman. When they love each other, they go into their bedrooms and then they go like this. And she put one toy on the top of the other. Your mom and your dad do this and that's why you exist and why your brother does too. I nodded, trying to follow her demonstration. Then she took two dolls and did that. There were people who do that instead. That's Mashoha. But my dad, it isn't nice to say so. Mr. Kuntz was a quiet man, but he knew how to take care of people. He and Flor were friends. I'd often see them sipping some chimarrão together in the backyard in front of his shop. I thought they were in love, so I asked Saarloos about it. She slapped me and annoyed, asked if I hadn't understood the things that she had just explained to me. But the fact that dolls were dolls, bears were bears, and mashohas were mashohas. Saarloos tried again. Okay, let's see. What do you like more, dolls or cars? Well, it depends on the car and on the doll. Saarloos rolled her eyes like she had before. Okay, what do you like more, dancing to Shusha or playing tag? I didn't know how to answer that either because everything depended really, and I was having trouble understanding what she was getting to. Okay, do you like the color pink or the color blue? I like green. For God's sake, this is your last chance. Who do you like more, me or Claudinho? Claudinho was a boy who lived on our street. Saarloos thought he was cute. You, of course, I said. Then you are a mashoha, she said impatient. I went home that day with my head hanging low, and when I crossed the street, I ran into Flor, who was standing between our gate and the electricity meter. Why the long face, sweetie? Because Saarloos thinks I'm sick too, that I've got what you have. I dragged my sneakers along the gravel. She bent over, put her hand on my forehead, as if I had the flu and she was trying to take my temperature. Don't be silly. There's nothing wrong with you. You're doing just great. I looked up at her to see if she looked like she was telling me the truth. She brushed her hair away from her face, and just then the transformer blew. The sparks lit up her eyes, and in that moment, she was the prettiest flower I've ever seen.
No, it's disconnecting.
Who would ever think of saying that the jellyfish is cause of the whale, or even that the sea is cause of the flower? No, they are simply more or less two remote zones of the same substance. The same goes for the objects of history. Some are not the causes of others, they are merely different moments of the same stem. Roland Barthes, Michelet. On the telephone cord stretching over the ravine, I slide down my cords, and you slide into love. From where I call, the mobile doesn't work. From where I'm standing, all of your words are blending together. Stuffing coins into slots, arcade game, Frogger love, feed my boca until it spills over love, waiting for the big win, candy floss, tiger texture love, shooting the water gun into the clown's mouth. I feel a jolt at the back of my throat, violent surprise, cold and acute. From a wooden house overlooking up a dried Bulgarian river, the Yantra, the voice sounds sexy, gravelly, like the terrain below. It masks the insecurities it so clearly exhibits when attached to the body. The body flops, feels, flounders. The voice holds a steady line. The voice is called chubby, feminine, soft, generous. The voice is not generous. It rebukes and punishes. The voice hides what the body cannot. In this romance, the rush to visit you is stupid when truly reflected upon. Through the detour of language of the other. The human voice depends on air to make a sound wave, and standing on the train platform, I am completely out of breath. For days and days. Can a living voice resemble the dead voice of a relative? DNA, body size, cranial structure so close. Picking up the receiver, a phone call to paradise. Does no one else lament the loss of the telephone cord, a place where the voice could go to hide? Many years later, drunk and alone in the empty house, I can see myself taking the phone wall apart, searching for residue with a Q-tip. I read on the internet, it is in fact possible to extrapolate droplets of the voice from the phone. I contain the voices of my mother and my father and their mothers and their fathers and so on and so on and so on and so on. Repetition is the very moment of non-truth. Writing supplants voice, making it less authentic. Auntie sits in her chair as the computer speaks for her. A slow hand glides across the screen to small pictures, icons, letters. I close my eyes. Yes, I know this makes no sense. To remember her voice. First she is laughing, and then she is yelling at me as I wait for the message to be read by the machine. I wait and put words in her mouth. Fantasy consolations. Meredith Monk sings a song called Ilo.
Cool. Thank you.
In it, she makes her voice round and hollow, full and cylindrical. Alone in the bedroom in the dark, eyes closed, it makes an empty chamber of my head as it swirls in resonance. Wah, 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 wah. Clearing the empty space for new conceptions of beauty where the old ones don't fit at all. Her voice is a clearing out, a slathering of ghosts to frighten the past. Flower blooms to my Neanderthal ear. Studies insist there is no lesbian voice. There is a gay voice. On the third rail, breathing down into the diaphragm to prove them wrong. Whatever comes out must bellow. The voice does all the work. Dyke that I am, the blinding darkness will save us from this mess I feel through my eyes, though as they move with the voice, coy and playful, I disgust myself. The text is a weaving of flesh as much as a body, letters grafted onto my tongue. From day one, we go about mimicking the sounds of someone. Wouldn't voice be the ultimate pharmacon? Taught, there's a specific sort of body required for a specific sort of sound. The sound is pleasure, and I do not have this pleasure, I do not have this body. Voice carries, but not from the dead. Put on a voice, put on a golden ring, put on a bangle, put on a voice with a skirt and some lipstick, put on a voice and talk into the mirror, half looking. Give it only a sideways glance. The bathtub itself produces the highest pitch gurgle, seemingly relative to the bodies, but not. She walks by practicing eurythmics. Left arm, right eye, right arm, left toe, the lack of coordination between the various means of bodily expression, the state of general or localized arrhythmy, antagonistic to the establishment of musical plastic harmony. They create a separation between the vocal act and the other muscular manifestations. For months, he carries a resonant tomb in his pocket. Leaning over the casket, he howls. The battery is dying, and even with a charge, only stays on long enough for 10 or so replays by now. Resonant tomb, fully disembodied voice. The memory becomes what he is holding, and he breaks down crying. His own memory shot to pieces in unending grief. Pressing the button yet again, the crypt cracks open. This technology is our landscape now. The voice becomes tinny in my memory. My grandmother grunts, my mother heaves, a series of women with little intent. The voice is a language itself. Motherese is a lost language. I'm terrified, pressing play on the VCR. Time spent listening to listening, wrapping chords in the kitchen beneath a shiny, sharp knife blade. I would listen to my mother talking during telephone calls, to her half of the conversation, to friends, to enemies. And I know I liked the reported speech better than the speech itself. I still do. I have the opposite problem, though. Of whom or what, I'm not sure, but it's the opposite problem. I prefer my voice to the rest of myself. It is the only thing that matches my identity. I would like to line up my body with my voice, create a new lexicon of identity through sound. Neck, throat, throttle, bottle, gurgle. Voiceovers, talking animals, talking robots, talking women. Teddy Ruxpin had a voice box. It could be removed, tampered with, manipulated. Chucky's voice comes back to haunt us even in our 30s. People laugh by the river and let out full throaty sounds and try to skim rocks that just kerplunk. Someday soon, the delta will flood again, and the water will cover this outsized grass and float us back to land. Althusser. Who's there? It's me. Althusser, but still, I do not know you. Music, voice, beyond sense. And that is why you cannot see me. There is no promise of limitless pleasure. There isn't. Wagner. To the eye appeals the outer man, the inner to the ear. When I open my mouth, the sound of light pours forth, voice like a church bell, attuned and chaste, moving the sound around from my head to my belly, belly to pubis. My early training shows the student ready to push the voice into different spaces of the body. To alter sound is to alter self. Alvin Lucier smoothing out his irregularities, my irregularities. My irregularities. Every woman in the world is singing at once. I am sitting in a room, I am sitting in a room, I am sitting in this room. Nancy, isn't the philosopher someone who always hears but cannot listen? I am sitting in a room, I am sitting in a room. I open the door with my commands. My eyes shift down as the chords lower. Laughter becomes an unstoppable force. Cerebellum serenade. Wah, 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 wah. All animals do not possess the vocal apparatus. All mammals do possess the vocal apparatus for talking.
Okay, you're good to go. I know, that's the good thing. It's just fun, you're just fun, but please do. This is the most data we can get, right, Randall? Okay, cut back on the other one. I'm gonna go wide on this. Okay, good. I went wide on the other one. So I can see you can see the dance. Go with the wide one with the dance. Don't tell me you don't know these out of focus camera. Is that good? I know. Are you still on the white one? Okay, go in the other one. The other one is a better shot. Okay, no, it's moving in front of you. Okay, next year for your birthday, Brian, I know what I can gift you. Are you on the white one?
Good evening, everyone. I hope you have enjoyed this crazy performance. This was Queer Dada. My name is Natalia della Ratta. I teach communication and media studies here at John Cabot University. I am a member of this amazing department that has organized this crazy event, the Communications Department. I want to thank all my colleagues for making this event possible. This event is part of our lecture series called Digital Delights and Disturbances. This is the first pandemic edition, and we have tried to give something different, like a different taste to the usual, Zoom flat meetings with the Brady Bunch style. This was possible because we have an amazing team helping us. First of all, I want to thank the entire university for making this event possible because, in Rome, we are now in the orange zone. And actually, yesterday we were in the red zone, so it was extremely difficult to put together such an event. But the university really supported us in making this possible. So I want to thank everyone, and especially special thanks to our intern, Letizia La Sorte, to the Media Lab crew, only two people actually, Brian Thompson and Roberto Ronzulli, and all the people who work for maintenance, events and logistics at John Cabot University. Thank you so much for making this craziness possible. And of course, I want to introduce the speakers. So please join me in virtually clapping in order of appearance. Simone van Saarloos, Raphael Khoury, Drew Pham, Natalia Borges Polesso, Allison Grimaldi-Dohanue, and last but not least, System Hardware Abnormal, aka Stefano Di Trapani, who has delighted us with this music. And of course, a special thank to Komi. I can't see really well now because I have a bra on my eyes, but thank you, Komi, the robot. That is our communication department robot. And last but not least, the show is going to end with a contribution by the Queer Alliance. Actually, this event was possible because we teamed up with the Queer Alliance, which is a club inside John Cabot University and a student club. So now we're going to broadcast their video. And I want to thank them for contributing to this event, supporting us, and contributing artistically also to the event. Once again, this was a labor of love. Thank you so much for joining us. If you want to keep in touch with our events, please do follow the YouTube channel, but also you can shoot us an email at DDD, like Digital Delights and Disturbances, at johncabot.edu. And the next event is going to be on April 15 at 6 p.m. Rome time, and it's going to be about Zoom fatigue. So stay tuned. I hope I haven't forgot anyone, but please join me in thanking everyone for making this event possible. And have a great evening. Thank you.
Hi from Rome.
Hi from Rome. Hi from Rome.
Today I want to read something out to you by Arca, someone who has helped me a lot in my journey of self-discovery. I want to read out something from her song called Vacuum. Aqui está, Mutant Manifesto. To scan the horizon of the unconscious, to soften the focus of ego as to allow light in, to shift in the face of a threshold, to transmute, to push against any rigid state of self, to hope into a focused point, a beam, a vector, to penetrate the boundary between the lucid and all dream state, Diva Experimental FM, to apply one's own will and carve out space within the psyche so that softness can be found. Diva Experimental FM. Perceive experience of feeling alive at any given moment. in virtue of fear and the entanglement of spirit flesh, a semi-permeable matrix in a slow dance, a morphing across space-time, recognition of the alien inside, the curious encouraged by beauty as a form of sentience, the ideal alchemy of the abject into love.
Her breast is fit for pearls.
But I was not a diver.
Her brow is fit for thrones.
But I have not a crest.
Her heart is fit for home.
I, a sparrow, build there.
Sweet of twigs and twine.
My perennial nest.
By Emily Dickinson.
From Open Me Carefully.
We're recording. This is take 10.
Coming together, it is easier to work. After our bodies meet, paper and pen, neither care nor profit, whether we write or not, but as your body moves under my hands, charged and waiting, we cut the leash. You create me against your thighs, hilly with images. Moving through our word countries, my body writes into your flesh, the poem you make of me. Touching you, I catch midnight, as moon fires set in my throat. I love you, flesh into blossom. I made you, and take you made into me.
I have a question for you. How do you see society? Not sure about the answer, actually. I mean, less than 10 days ago in Rome, a young gay couple has been beaten up by a man just because the two were kissing while waiting for the metro to arrive. On the other hand, however, I also see a society that is becoming more open and inclusive, which is at least trying to challenge stereotypes and the gender binary conception. A society made of people that desire to be just as they are,